All right, welcome to the December 4th, 2020 Club Cubase Google Hangout. I'm going to do a quick audio test to make sure that everything is working as expected. Bear with me just for a second. I'll refresh my browser on my other computer. Okay, so it sounds like audio is coming through fine. My name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America as a Steinberg specialist, and I'll be the host for today's Hangout. I am presenting from Alexandria, Virginia, just outside of Washington, D.C. in the United States. So if you have not attended a Hangout before, if you're watching this on a replay, you may want to skip ahead till about 10 minutes or so as people get logged in. So we could do that. If you are watching the Hangout live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us who you are and where you're from. And also just let us know if this is your first Hangout that you're attending. How the Hangout works is we could have questions submitted in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could ask them in the live chat field. We'll try to go through the questions chronologically and get through as many questions as completely and as succinctly, hopefully, as possible. So we'll try to go for about 4 hours, or if we run out of questions, we could wrap up early, but we'll see how it goes. So if you want to ask your questions, sometimes when asking questions, it is the ability to ask questions can far exceed my ability to answer the questions in a real-time manner. So it may take me a little while to catch up. Sometimes I may be an hour behind, 45 minutes behind, 30 minutes behind the live question. So if you ask a question, if we could refrain from, or try not to post the same question over and over and over again repeatedly, that would be really helpful and appreciated. Just kind of makes the whole process much faster. And if it's in the question, occasionally, if it's in the list, we'll try to get through it. Occasionally, my chat field, if there's a lot of activity, it may refresh and I may lose a couple of questions. I'll apologize in advance for that, but we'll try to go through all the questions as in chronological order as they're asked. Like many of you, I have family that's at home during the Hangout, so I may be interrupted. My wife is working directly above me, so you may hear her in the background on a conference call. My son is doing virtual school, and we'll be wrapping up this afternoon, so I may have to stop and help him with his Legos or get a Disney show on for him. So I'll apologize in advance for any of those disruptions, but we'll try to make those as short as possible. But let's go ahead and see who is on the Hangout. Okay, so we see Tanmay, we see Michaels. Okay, so we see Ace. All right, you see Jay from New Haven, Connecticut. Good to see you. All right, so we have Scambot Terminator. Good to see you again. All right, Sir Robert from Atlanta. All right, so we see. All right. We have Jan from Stockholm, who's doing cubaseindex.com, where you could search for questions that were asked on Hangouts. Okay, we have Pablo from Galicia, España. All right, we have Vinny Sabatino from Orlando, Walter from St. Louis. Good to see you guys. Agent K, who does some moderation for us, which is always appreciated. All right, we have Jazz Dude, who sometimes will answer more live questions and is really great with sharing his knowledge of PC building and many different things. So it's great to see Jazz Dude from I believe he's in Heidelberg in Germany. We have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. Good to see you, John. I'm not sure where Agent K lives, so I don't think he's mentioned it on a Hangout. But let's check out, see who else. All right, so we have Athens, Greece. We have South Shields, England. Good to see you, Jason. Okay. All right, so good to see Rob Potterworth. I like seeing all of your pictures you shared of your studio over the years, Rob. All right, so we have Panama. All right, so we have Rich from Reston, Virginia, so pretty close to me. All right, so we have John McVicker from Philadelphia. That's great. All right, good to see Rick on Valentine on a Hangout from Charlotte. Says he's cranking on Cubase 11 and loving it. That's great. All right, so we have Soren from Sweden. All right, so we have Senegal, Denmark. All right, so more from Sweden, Germany. All right, so we have Taylor Sapp from Pine Grove. All right, so we see Pablo Vasquez from Galicia, Spain. He wanted me to say his name, so. Okay, so seeing Project Logical Editor questions. All right, so we have Belgium, Israel. Okay, so we have from British Columbia and Canada, UK, from Reading, UK, Sherman Oaks. Good to see you, Ted, on the Hangout. All right. All right, so we have Brianna Yotown from Yotown. Okay. All right, so I see that my high school Spanish was good for pronouncing Pablo's name correctly. So you can thank Mrs. Engman from my 8th grade Spanish teacher. So she was good. Okay, we'll let some more people get logged in and we'll get started here in just a couple minutes. Okay, so let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, we have more people getting logged in. And if you haven't subscribed to the Cubase or any of the Steinberg YouTube channels, make sure you do that. All right, so we see sub 403. And you could also hit the like button if you like. That makes it easier for us to continue to do these Hangouts. All right, good to see Pauly D from Arizona. You were saying it's a little cold. All right. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. Let me scroll up. Okay, so just a question, and I think we answered this in the chat field, but for the benefit of people who are listening and maybe not on the chat, I'm hoping someone will create a page with indexes for all questions you answer in your streams with active links to YouTube videos. There's so much information, which is sometimes hard to find again. So, yeah, definitely check out Jan, who's on the Hangout, has done a great job. And Ted Springman's also done a great job of kind of archiving all the topics. But if you go to cubaseindex.com, you can just kind of search for particular topics. So like, oh, I want to do this. And if it was covered in a Hangout, you could probably find it in there. And there's, just this year, I think there's 65 Hangouts or something. So So yeah, check out the cubaseindex.com. So we'll give a nice little plug to Jan. And I hope his name isn't pronounced Jan and I'm saying his name incorrectly. So, but I'll go with my European pronunciations. Okay, so we have a question from Ace, who I believe is in Texas, in the United States. Hi, Greg. How are you? Hope you and your family are well. We're doing great. Hey, man, I just wanted to thank you for all your help. I'm learning a ton from you. Thanks. We're glad the Hangouts have been helpful. All right, so I see from Tanmay, hey, I just wanted to address this real quick. Cubase 11 has some serious crashes on macOS 10.15.7. In middle of playback, the playhead freezes and the program crashes, and it's more than often, please fix it, and then followed up by quick. So I don't have 10.15.7, but I've been running it on just my Mac is coming from our IT department, put Mojave on it. So, I haven't updated the OS just because it wouldn't work with some of our corporate stuff, but I'm running 10.14.6, it looks like. But I haven't had many issues with that. I would check Tanmay to see if it's going to be related to, see if you just have a project that's loaded up with, using like an internal drive or, and then build from there. See if you're using plugins, if it's accessing something off of like playing samples off of a USB drive, and try to take some of the variables away. So I would try that. And also when you start Cubase, if you tried to start it in the diagnostic mode, like the safe start, which you could do on the Mac by holding down Command Option Shift, like right after double clicking on the Cubase executable, the Cubase program icon, and try running without third-party plugins, and try running, with also just with preferences temporarily disabled, and see if you have different behavior. But I haven't heard that from people, and if it was kind of doing that, regularly, I would probably hear about it by now. So it may be something particular to your system, but I think if you do those things, you could probably isolate it and check it out. Okay. Hi, Greg. Hope all is well. Question. How can Cubase figure out the key of a MIDI file? Can Cubase figure out the song key from acapella? So it's not going to automatically figure out the key from different parts, but you from acapella, from audio. You could look at it in Very Audio and kind of do a quick analysis. I guess you could take, if you have all the parts recorded on separate tracks, you could take it into Very Audio and do extract it to MIDI and do this technique. So let's say if I have a quick, I'll just show you a little bit here. So let's say if I have just a piano part, or with MIDI data. So if I wanted to look at this, we could look at it, let's say in Score Editor. Let me just open up this project without a chord track, and we can show you how to do this pretty quickly. Let me see if it's in my recent files. Okay, I'll just open it up from the location. So okay, so let's say if I have my MIDI data here and I'm looking at it, and if we wanted to switch this to our score view, we could just look at it in our score view. But if I wanted to figure out kind of what chords and what key a particular song is, we could take just a MIDI track and we could select the event. If you go to your project menu, let's go to chord track, and let's create chord symbols. And at this point, I hit OK, and it's automatically kind of figured out what the chords are of the piece of music. And if you have this little icon here activated, this will show the scale. So it did an analysis of this piece here and determined it's in G major. So that's how you could do it. So select the event, go to edit, or project menu rather, to chord track and say create chord symbols. And you'll be able to just simply have those chords. And if you have the show scale activated, that will determine the key for you. Also, what you could do is, in Cubase 11, if we're in kind of the score editor, you could go to the scale assistant. So if we go to scale assistant here, you could have Cubase kind of automatically give you different suggestions for the key, doing an analysis of the MIDI part. So we could do that directly there, and that could look at a particular part and do that. So that's another way with Cubase 11 to do that. Okay, so see, question. Hi, Greg. Lost the sound of the metronome. Where do I fix it? So a lot of times, so let's say if I'm here and I have my metronome. So let's say I'm in 6/8 time, and I will just come right over here. So let's say if I'm not hearing the metronome, so generally the metronome could be routed out directly through kind of the main area. So let's say if I go to transport and you go to your metronome setup. So at this point, you could say the click sounds, you could route it to, I think it's in here. But you could choose kind of the, just see if it's, okay, so the audio click outputs, you could see it there. So if you wanted to go to your stereo out, you could do that. When someone's metronome often disappears, sometimes it got disabled in the control room. So if you go to the control room area here under the main tab, you'll see this little metronome here. So sometimes people will have the metronome turned on by hitting C and still not hear. It says, looks like the metronome is turned on. You should be hearing the click track, but go to the control room and make sure that, because you could turn off the metronome in the control room. So that's something else to check. So that's often when I get the exasperated phone call from a longtime Cubase user who's like, I can't hear the click. What's wrong? It's driving me crazy. It got turned off in the control room, maybe when they're just grabbing a volume inadvertently. So check there as well. But again, go to your transport menu to metronome setup, and this is where you could choose what output that the metronome is being routed to. Okay, Greg, could you please show how to create my own custom groove agent new kit from wave samples, how and where to save without overriding existing Cubase libraries? So let's come over here. Let's just jump to like a different project. So if I have just an instance of Groove Agent, I will come over here and I'll click on the right icon now so we could open up the particular VST instrument, and I'm going to just clear the agent. So I'm going to just come here and remove the kit. So we have kind of a blank instance of this. So at this point, I want to just take, let's say I'm going to build my own kit. I will just turn my snap quickly off, and I'm just going to select just like a little portion of a kick drum and drag that. Let's find like a little bit of the snare. So let's say I want this snare hit and I want to drag that. So now at this point you could kind of, choose different start or end positions if you wanted to. So let's just say I'll just trim this particular sample. So at this point, if I wanted to save this as my own kit, all I would need to do is to right click on the agent itself. And you'll see export kit with samples. And then you could just kind of export it to, wherever you want and then be able to re-import that. So once you have all the samples loaded in, just choose to export kit with samples, and then you can open it up from the same location. Okay, we have a question. Hello, Greg from UK. Let's see. Is it possible to get rid of the old installation folders, as it's happened to me before, to miss file libraries, files/libraries after deleting an old one, so I don't have to so I had to download them again. So let me just. So is it possible to get rid of old installation folders, as it's happened to me before, to miss file libraries after deleting an old one, so I had to download them again? So if you have, like, let's say, Cubase 11 has come out, if you wanted to uninstall, when you install Cubase 11, and if you had, let's say, version 9.5, 10, 10.5, and 11, all the programs can still be, will be installed. So just installing 11 doesn't get rid of your previous versions. So those will remain intact. So, but, as you install the other versions, those are going to install. Excuse me, let me just cough real quick. Those will, as new versions will come out, there's going to be new loop libraries, new content that comes with it. So you do have the option, and if you do an update, just like the update files from, let's say, from Cubase 11.5 from Cubase 11 from 10.5. And if you just do that, it won't reinstall content that was installed with previous versions. You can do the full installer, and that will reinstall all the different content that comes with the program. So there's two different downloads. There's a full content. So if you had a brand new computer, you'd be able to work with that. But if you, are on the same computer and everything is set up, the samples and content will go not into the program folder, but into kind of a common folder independent of the application, so that, as you uninstall the program, the content will still be there. So you can leave it there, but it depends on if you do the full installer. If you're just starting from scratch, do the full installer, and then you could delete the files. But sometimes, like for the content, the installer is really just the content file itself. So if you delete that, then, you may have missing files. So, try to leave the content in place, or you may have to manually reinstall it, but you could, leave the programs there, or uninstall if you really need to. But, most of the programs don't take a lot of space. It's the content that could take a lot of space. Okay, so all right, so we have a question from Jay from New Haven, Connecticut. Is there a way to shift vocals and other recordings around tempo track while preventing slurring and dragging or chipmunk sounds? So, if you have a tempo track here, I'll just do a new project quickly. And let's say I'll go to one of the new libraries here, Bloom. So let's say I just some vocal samples here. All right, so let's say I have this file and I have my tempo track. So, and I'll go ahead and we'll just turn on, let's say, our tempo here. So let's say we're at 120 beats a minute. All right, so just turn this up a little bit. So let's say, So when I select this file, you could have this in musical mode. So, and if it's in musical mode, that audio file is going to follow the tempo changes. So if I change my tempo from 240 to 120 to 240 at this point when I play, or if I wanted to go down to 60 beats a minute, or so it's like 60 beats a minute. All right, so it's pretty extreme. So let's say, it's our original tempo is 120. But if I wanted that to play back at the same speed, you could take it out of musical mode. And then when I change the tempos, let's say to 240, that audio file will play back at the same speed. But as soon as it's in musical mode, it's then going to follow the tempo changes. So, so if you don't want it to be affected by tempo changes, just make sure that it's not set to musical mode. And there will be different kind of algorithms that you'll have here. So let's say maybe I wanted this to be formant, preserved, elastic on pitch, and that might be a good algorithm for vocals. So you could have different algorithms that could kind of prevent different, playback algorithms. So let's say now we'll put this to 240. You could have, your different changes. Let's say we go to 80 beats a minute. Or maybe not 300, sorry. So that way you could have kind of different algorithms as well. So if you don't want it to follow tempo changes, just simply, take it off musical mode. And I see that Jay is chomping at the bit for next week's upgrades, probably for his Nuendo 11. All right. So, yeah, it's a great upgrade. I was just doing some videos on it for a dealer late last night. All right, so a question from Scambot Terminator. Hello, Greg and everyone. Question one, I asked this before but forgot how to fix it. When I cut or shorten a selection of a part, it cuts out and disappears from recorded section. How to fix, please? So I think this might be dealing with delete overlaps. So let me see if I could show a little bit in this example. All right, so let's say if I have a number of different lanes present here. So this is all kind of different comp recordings. And let's say I've now done my comp. So I'm going to say, okay, I want this part from that take, that part here. So now this is my perfect comp performance. So if you go to your audio, if it's selected, so let's say, so say if I just have my selection tool here, and if we go to audio to advanced, there's also delete overlaps. So maybe this is what you're describing. So audio advanced, delete overlaps. And now as like there's no audio there, it'll actually kind of delete. So the event, like all the events can be kind of gotten rid of. So it'll do that. And you could also see this. Another preference that you can set is under editing is just to set delete overlaps. And now as I would make a change here, that would automatically cut out the parts that aren't being used. So as I just have these parts, let's say, okay, I want to take this part, and as I move this over and those parts aren't being used, that will just delete the overlapped events. So you could do it from audio functions menu, or if you're doing it from MIDI stuff, we could also, if you want to do it globally, go to preferences, and under editing, just enable delete overlap. So that could work for both audio and MIDI tracks. So try that. Okay, so let's see. Question also from Scambot Terminator. I bought Valhalla, Shimmer Verb, and Classic Verb. Cubase 10.5 Pro found folder for Classic, but fails repeatedly to locate Shimmer Verb folder. Could this be because Cubase no longer supports VST2? Do I need to change to VST3 and how to do that? So, Cubase still supports VST2 plugins. If you have VST3 versions, that's obviously ideal to work with. And you could see if there is, like we can't make every third-party program work in, if we can't turn a VST2 plugin into a VST3, but, the plugin developer can do that. And you can see whether you have, if you go to the plugin information, if it's a VST2 plugin, you could click, if you go to your studio menu to VST plugin manager, you'll see this little settings icon, and make sure that you have this particular folder and go through and make sure that it actually, is, sometimes if it's a convolution reverb, you may have like wave files, and those wave files may be used to load into the convolution reverb, but that may not be where the actual plugin is. So make sure that you actually find, like your shimmerverb.dll or your shimmerverb, plugin, and that folder is defined. And it's not, in case it is, I'm not familiar with the shimmerverb. I don't use it, unfortunately. But you could make sure that, that particular folder is defined in your path, and it's not and that you're not defining a folder that maybe has convolution impulses or IR files, like impulse response files. But Cubase still works with, VST2 and VST3 plugins. So, right, great to see Sir Robert from Atlanta. All right. Going through some introductions here. Okay. Hey, Greg, I moved from question. Hey, Greg, I moved from FL to Cubase to Cubase 11 Pro. And FL, I can add a MIDI chord to make it strum where the route hits first and so on. Can Cubase do this? So, we could do some similar type things. So one of the editing tools that you could have is, I'll just add a quick instrument track. And I'll just kind of draw some chords in. We'll show you a couple of techniques that you could do. All right. Lovely chords. So, one of the tools that a lot of people miss is this little trim tool. So if you come here, I think if you just hold down like Alt, on it, you could trim like the ends of notes. So if I come here, if I wanted to do like maybe different types of strums, you could do stuff like that very easily. So if you want to stagger notes like guitarists would. So, you could do directly, like if I wanted to just kind of cut the end of the notes, I could do that. If I hold down my Alt or Option key, you can cut the beginning of the notes. So, you could check out some of those different options to work with. So if you wanted to set up to do like some different types of strumming patterns as well. So that's one little editing tip that a lot of people miss. So just use this particular tool, the trim tool, and you could do some creative stuff to do like guitar parts quite easily there. All right. See, Jazz Dude's giving Jan a shout out for Cubase Index. That's great. Okay, so hi Greg, is it possible to create a key command macro which will change the transpose function on an audio event? Many thanks. So let's say, I'll just kind of jump back to this project here. All right, so let's say if I wanted to come here, so if you want to do it with like a key command, so let's say I'll do this on the bass part here. Make this a little louder. So there's a couple of different ways to approach it. One is I think you could create a key command for audio processes. Let me just see if it's... So if you just go to process here and you could say, I just want to do pitch shift. So let's say I'll just assign this to. So if I wanted to just take that and then I could just say, okay, I want this to go up or down by, semitones or cents. So that way I could just say, okay, I want to take this. So I just process that. So let me just so it sounds lovely. What's a half step amongst friends? All right, so let's say. So again, I could just say, okay, Alt, I'm just going to my key command that I set up. So if I wanted to go up, it's now processed that file. So you could just do kind of different offline processing and be able to do that right there. So, so as you work with it. So that sounds so lovely. And you could also get this window by hitting F7, which is the direct offline processing. So you could do that with a key command, but you could also just, if you have the file selected here, just select it. And you could also, just go to transpose. You could just come here and just say, and you could transpose, whatever events are selected kind of directly right from there. So give those two things a try. And I think, you can find a way to do that as well. All right, good to see Taylor from Pine Grove. Okay, so we see a second question. In MIDI editor, I changed the piano voicing to guitar and it changed every track. Can I isolate each track for that? So when you're doing this for MIDI data, I'll switch projects here to show. So that's going to be kind of on a track by track basis. So you could have kind of the so we look at our chord track, we could choose to, see kind of different voicings. But if I wanted to come here, you could go to the chords. And if you have, the voicings at this point, we could say, if you wanted to follow the chords in scales of a particular MIDI part, you could do that. So, here we could just say, okay, we're going to follow directly. And so I'll do this quickly for just a MIDI part. So when we go to your chords here, so if you select a track, you could select kind of different voicings. So let's say I want to go to, your chords. So you could also just kind of, set it up on kind of a track by track basis from the chords here. But if we select this, we could just, have the tracks not follow the chord tracks, but, here we could do basic, piano or guitar. So you could change it there. But if you change it here, you could have those voicings, and then you could have independent voicings when you select and to follow chord tracks. So whether you want it to be chords and scales or just chords or scales, and you could adjust the voicings. So as soon as we're here, you could say from chord track, and then each track could be independently done. So if you want a piano on one track and guitar on another, you could do that quite easily. Okay, so question. I just got my new computer, has no CD drive. Old computer has Wavelab 7. I want to use it on my system, but downloads only go back to Wavelab 8. Is there another way to get it for the new machine? If you want to email me, Taylor, I may have a like an upload link. I may have it uploaded already, but if you want to email me just as a brain cramp email reminder, I'm sure I could. I'm sure I have a download somewhere of it that I could share with you. Okay, so from Ed Rungman, project logical editor question. I have projects with hundreds of tracks from OMF with Audio 1, etc. as track names. I'd like to copy part of description, text, status bar, or file name to each Cubase track so that I could export each track using auto naming from track name. Is there a way to do this in Project Logical Editor or macro? Okay, so let's take a look and see if we could come up with something. If you're in okay, so if you're in Cubase 11, one of the things you can do, and you may be able to do this in previous versions as well, I think you can. But if you go to your export audio mixdown, you'll see this little icon here for naming scheme. So let's say the events are all called, okay, so you have audio 1 is track name. So you'd like to copy the description text as file name. So here you have, so there are like some different, I'm trying to see if there's a way to, all right, so here you could apply kind of like, it looks like your channel here is set to audio 1 and you want the description name kind of extracted. So, if we do, all right, so I'll just do a quick test and see. So I will. Okay, so I'll just do a lovely recording here. All right, so we call this audio 1. Okay. Okay, so let's say in our description, we'll say from Ed Brugman. Okay, so let's say if I want to export, right, let's get to our naming scheme, and I will choose to do maybe just see if we do the name. And let's see if we could do this. All right, so let's create an audio track. All right, and let's add it to the queue. All right, just did a really long locator's range. All right, so that's not extracting the description. Let's see if we can do it in a project logical editor. All right, so let's say if we want to transform, and I'm not sure if we could actually kind of extract. Hang on, my son is knocking on the door. Bear with me just a second. Okay, I'm back. So let's look at the project logical editor. So I don't think that we could kind of suck out the actual name from extract it to apply. Yeah, I mean, we could replace append, prepend. We could generate names. Let me just see. Yeah, I could, I could see if I could play around with it some more, but I don't know a way of extracting it from the description of the name. But I'll play around with it a little more, Ed. Sorry about that. Okay, so let me just take a quick look here real quick. All right, so let's move on. Okay, so hi, Greg. How do I scroll forward and backward past the cursor not using mouse? I know using plus and minus moves cursor. I wanted to move the whole event window forward or backward, even past the cursor. So let's see. I think it's maybe kind of follow up from last week. Okay, so you kind of want to just move. So let's say if I know you could kind of just hold down, if you don't want, I know you could hold down the shift key and kind of navigate that way using your mouse scroll wheel if you don't want to use the mouse here. Another method, so, this will, the plus and minus key, will move, on the transport will move. Sorry. So, just using, let me activate the project.
Musical history laid out on the floor. I've got to.
Okay. Okay, so you just want to, let me see if I could. So, generally if you don't want to use the mouse, I just kind of come and just move, you hold down the shift key and move forward. If another thing that you could do is if we go to the overview window, so there's a project overview, and I know people will often kind of, take the project overview and be able to navigate there kind of at the top. But those all kind of require a mouse. There may be a keyboard shortcut. Let me just see if I could experiment with a couple of combinations. So that's, again, kind of moving the cursor. There's probably a way to do it, but I'm just kind of blanking on it now. So sorry about that. Okay. I'm just going to do a quick test. I'm seeing a message about my video stream health. So I want to do a quick test and let me know if that is acting up on you. If the video is choppy and I could maybe reset the OBS, but I just wanted to. So if you could let me know in the comments if the video is scrolling okay for you. I'm just getting kind of a little warning message. Okay, and I'll just wait a second here and see if that. So I'm watching it on one computer. It seems like it's streaming okay. Okay, so seeing other people saying it looks fine, so I'll just kind of jump back. Okay, so let's go ahead and I'll move on. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay. All right. Okay, so question. Hi, Greg. Sometimes the quick controls automatically start changing the volume and bypass the VST instrument. Can't figure out what is changing where. Should I look? I can't. The automation data written. Okay, so it can really depend, if you have quick controls that are kind of configured for a particular system, I could, come over here and So now if I wanted to add quick controls, I'll go to this and let's say, so I have, my quick controls here. So sometimes, we can, so let's say if I just wanted to automate my quick controls, take a look at it. So I could just see the parameters show up here as automation. So if I want to go to my panning, I can see those different parameters just kind of show up. So at that point, you could see it in the automation view. So, but it could be that sometimes maybe if you have your controller defined as quick controls. So when we go to like your VST quick controls, if you have a controller that's defined, for, your different quick controls that you could, have that controller, thinking you're controlling a different parameter. But your quick control data, the automation is actually just written directly in the part itself as normal automation. So, you could maybe turn off the quick controls and see if that makes a difference for you. So, okay. So, just see, hi again, Greg. Question, please explain how shuttle speeds work and how they help. So you could set up your key commands to come over here, and this is often used for doing different editing. So if we wanted to play back at different shuttle speed, so let's say I'll just do a quick search for shuttle. So we could shuttle play at 1/2 speed, 1/4 speed, 1/8, or play it back faster. And what this is going to allow you to do is just to kind of come over here and if we're in let's say scrub mode, this could allow you to do different edits like while you're or if you wanted to just kind of switch your playback mode here. So, we could go from play. So, if I was like trying to just kind of find the spot, we could use those particular key commands for scrubbing. So I could just say, okay, let's come here. Let's put it into. So if you wanted to, I could just say, you could use like controllers here to kind of just, scrub if you wanted to, or just for positioning. So it's often like, having your key commands kind of do this stuff where just to find kind of like an edit spot where there's maybe, no transients or is defined as zero crossing. And that's why you would kind of use those key commands to trigger that. So you could play back faster or slower if you need it. So just see, hi Greg, question, Magnus from Sweden here. I wonder why you can't pause with the play button. So it's, so, I mean, if, I'm not sure if it's necessary to have a pause if it's a stop, because you could change the transport behavior, to, if you wanted it to stop exactly where it is, you could actually have your preference under preferences to transport, and you could say, I want to return to start position on stop. So, if I just hit my space bar here, it'll now go back to where we started. But if I wanted it to pause, I could go right over here and I'll just activate that particular preference. So as I and so this way it'll just kind of So you could have it just pause directly there just by kind of changing that particular preference. But either way, pause is stopping, and you could have the stop return to the start position, or the pause stop right where it's at and be able to continue from there. So check the transport preference. Okay, so I see that Pablo's saying that he wrote down his questions today. And so we'll have to get watched out. We'll have to watch out for them. Okay, good to see Michael on a Hangouts from Netherlands. All right, and we have someone else checking in from Belgium. So question, I'm having problems using backup in sampler track. It doesn't save which samples I use. I lose those part of the song. So let's go ahead and try a quick file here. So I will do a new project. And I'll just drag a loop over, let's say a sample quickly. So I will come and I'm just going to quickly bounce this selection. Okay, and let's go ahead and put it in our sampler track. Okay, so let's say I have this as my sampler track. Okay, and so I'm going to, we'll save this as, let's say December 4th sampler track. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and back up the project. So I'm going to do new folder. Okay, so I'm going to keep all those as they are. So I'll close this project and I'll open up my archive. So I think I put it in Hangouts. All right, so there's my sampler track with the sample that's automatically saved directly there. So so one other thing that you could try to do, so when you do that, so I'm not sure if you're doing the backup project function, because when you do that, let's say you have an audio file, it could show up if we go to your pool window, you could see the audio here, but you also will have your audio that's part of the sampler track as well. So you should have the audio kind of showing in two different locations if the file is in the project, but it should also be indicated in the sampler track. So if maybe you're just copying over the audio files and you're not copying the sampler track when you're backing up, but doing the backup project seemed to automatically include the sampler track that we opened up. So there's, and I'll just make sure that I got so that was in our backup folder. So that was the file. So that seemed to work as expected. So make sure that you're actually doing the backup project and maybe not manually copying files, and see if that makes a difference for you. All right. Agent K finally admits that he lives in a secret bunker. So that's good to know. All right. All right, so we have Denmark checking in. All right, so we have a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to rename in batch cycle markers or have a cycle marker follow a counter not on export, like dirt footstep 01, and then make it the next cycle marker, dirt footstep 02, 03, 04? Okay. So if you want like cycle markers to be incrementally named, okay, let's give it a try. So I'm going to create a marker track. Okay, so let's give this a shot. Okay, so let's say we're going to take our marker files. So we have our cycle markers here, just 1 through 4. So let's say, let's go to the project logical editor. Okay, so let's see, MIDI type equals marker name, and let's say we want to, so if I have these just as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we'll say prepend, and let's just say dirt footstep. Okay. So let's see if we hit apply. Okay. Let's see if I maybe select all of the markers here. Oh, sorry. Okay, so now okay, so I've renamed all the markers. So let's say, and we want to add maybe a counter. Okay, so so let's say we have our marker names. Okay, so let's get to the project logical editor, and let's see if we could just prepend. Okay, so we could have kind of set up like that. So now we could have the markers as 1, and then like the dirt footstep 2, dirt footstep 3. So let's say we wanted to undo that, and let's do append with dirt footstep. And so I'll take those. So hopefully, so it looks like maybe since the markers aren't named, but if you do that, you know, so give that a try and see if that will work for you, Sasha or Sacha. But here we can see the number followed by that. It's not necessarily, so you could, let's see if we generate a name. But, you know, play around with that and see if that will work for you. So it's, while it's not necessarily carrying over, but when we go to, let's say, our marker track, and let's look at it here in the inspector. And there may be, I'm just seeing if there's a way to have like an event counter. But it looks like it's all kind of named the same. So, but see if that, you know, you could see the marker name here. And the number. So see if that would work for you, even though the marker isn't necessarily have that particular number, but you can see, you know, the number there indicated from the marker number itself. So see if that works for you, and I could play around with it if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, we're good to see Ezra Jones from Kenya. All right, and Robbie Bowling for Dallas. All right, and I see Agent K wants people to hit the thumbs up. All right, and we have France in the house. Okay, so we see Pablo solved his problem from the last Hangout. That's good to know. Okay, looks like my Hangout field just jumped on me, so I may have lost a couple questions. I'll scroll back. Okay, so sorry if I lost some questions. I see Michael Teams from Weatherford, Texas is on. Okay. Okay, and I see Mandy Lane is on. Good to see you both on a Hangout. I like Michael Teams playing. I think he played some guitar parts in the song that Gareth did. So sorry if I lost some questions. So I see a question from, hi Greg, I sent you an email with a question of how you can point an automation point and enter the value you want instead of moving it up and down until you reach the correct value. So let's go ahead and take a look at that. So I was going to get to this a little bit later, but we might as well do it now. So let's go ahead and just activate this. So I think in the question was, there's an automation scenario like this, where this automation point, let's say it's at minus 2.52. And as we go to the next point, you know, we can see kind of different values, you know, as we just navigate through. We can see in the info line are different values here for automation points. So I think what the question was, if I understood correctly, is they wanted to take the value of this automation point and make sure that this value were identical. So right now this is a minus 6.37 and this is a minus 2.52. So, you could just move it, but that's not so much fun. You could copy this value, just Control or Command C, and then select the value that you want, the automation point, and, come here and paste and have that automation value go to the same line. Now you can set up a key command for edit info. So if you do this a lot, you could come over here and there's a key command that you could set up for, I think it's edit info. So edit info line. So if you hit this key command, and I think I have it set to this, now you could just automatically put the cursor there and be able to kind of navigate hitting the tab key. So you could say, I want this particular value, let's say, is down. So if you're doing this like 100 times a day, you could copy, go to the value here, copy, and let's say select the next automation or select the automation point that you want, go to your info line. So say, do that, hit the tab key once and then paste and enter. And then those two will be kind of at the same point. So that's kind of I know that if you're doing that 14,000 times a day, it could be, a pain, but, I think that you could do that pretty quickly as well. All right, so let's move on. All right, good to see Gareth is on a Hangout. Thanks for sending the track over, Gareth, the Voodoo Leche track. I played some bass for Gareth. That was fun. Okay. So question to Greg. When using multi-export 38 tracks, I get the message, not enough disk space on disk 10.5 gives me no problems. Is that a known bug? I've seen a couple of other people report this. I've seen it on some forums. I haven't run into it myself, but I would just check to make sure. A lot of people may be kind of going on autopilot, but when you do this, try just setting it to maybe a different folder and see if that makes a difference. I have seen that from 2 other people, but I haven't experienced it myself. I was kind of looking in some other discussions, and it doesn't seem like it's happened to a lot of people, but I have, heard it. I saw it once on a Facebook post, I think, and maybe someone mentioned that they saw it in a Hangout, but I haven't been able to recreate that. But try a different folder and see if that makes a difference, or a different hard drive, just out of curiosity. Okay, so I just see kind of a confirmation about the Valhalla Shimmer Reverb plugin, and that's 32-bit. So if it's a 32-bit plugin, that's not going to be supported. You would need to have like a third-party bridging solution. So with that, it's probably not a great, thing for your system stability to run, a lot of 32-bit plugins or be bridging them. It's kind of old, so... All right, so Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button. So, and Gareth is mentioning the same thing. So it's just a question. I noticed some VST3 plugins won't save parameters with songs, so I have to use VST2 versions to get them to save with songs. So let Cubase know not to ever get rid of VST2. And is there a fix? I'm not sure. I haven't run across that at all. So, sometimes if there's, issues with plugins not being able to, recall save parameters with the song. It could be up to the plugin itself. So sometimes that could be out of our control. But if you could let me know if there's like particular plugins, that would be helpful information, or if you see it with included Steinberg plugins, but I haven't really come across that. Even on my studio computer where I have, a nice collection of third-party plugins. Okay. Okay, so we see Jeff Zabelski said he did his TJ's wine and bread run. So Trader Joe's. I was there yesterday morning at Trader Joe's, so I love Trader Joe's. Says he doesn't have to go anywhere now. Now I'm going to download Spectral Layers today, getting a deal. So thanks to this Yamaha Steinberg for the savings. It's great. Enjoy your Spectral Layers. So it's a great product. Okay. Okay, so I just see, hey Greg, Yakzan, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, from India. Really appreciate what you're doing, helping us out. So glad it's been helpful. So thanks for joining the Hangout. Okay. Okay. So I just see, had a quick question. Is it possible to transfer my MediaBay favorites from Cubase 10.5 to the new 11? So I think they automatically transfer directly over. So, the MediaBay is kind of independent of the Cubase version. But I think it might be included also. You could just simply... you could also try, I'm not sure if the MediaBay for certain, but it might be included in the profile manager if it doesn't. But come over here and export a profile from your version 10.5 and import it directly in. But on 4 of my computers, all my MediaBay favorites just kind of transferred over without doing anything. So... Okay, just reading through comments. So lots of great discussion I get to miss or get to read through about 30 minutes after. Okay, so question, is it possible to assign the undo function onto a MIDI controller button as a shortcut key within Cubase? All right, so we could do this a couple of different ways. Probably the easiest way to do it, if you wanted, if it's transmitting MIDI information, you could go to the studio setup and go to generic remote. So at this point, I want to say, using my Nectar controller here, and I want to do a quick MIDI learn, and I'll just hit a note. Okay, and what we want to do is we're taking the incoming MIDI message, and now I want to, I think it's going to be found under command, edit, and probably you could just type in now undo. So now every time I hit this MIDI message, and again, if you don't know what MIDI message it is, just click learn. If it's spitting out MIDI, it'll be captured. And we want it to be command edit to undo. So at this point, I'll hit OK. So let's say I move something over here. I hit that key on my keyboard, and that's automatically undoing. I move my automation up or down. So let's come here, undo that. I want to make copies of this part. So again, just undo, undo, undo. So just hitting that one particular key. So go to studio setup, to generic remote. And at this point, say, capture whatever MIDI message it is. And then you can come over here and just say, I want this to, under command, the edit category to undo. And then you can map just about any function. I know people that have entire MIDI controllers that are not assigned to play a single note, but just to do different functions in MIDI. So just like their own control surface, and people, oh, I hit F1 for this, I hit G#1 for this, you know. Okay, so question, is there a mobile app that works with Cubase for controlling the transport functions such as record, play, stop? There's a number of different mobile apps that do that, but you could also check out the Cubase IC Pro that's available for iOS, and that's a great little control app. So you could do editing, you can do, you know, fire off different key commands and macros and be able to, you know, set up your headphone mixes, everything directly from that. Okay. Okay, so a question from Rob Podorf. So, hi, Greg. Hope you're well. My friend, I'm doing great. I hope you're doing well. Question, is there any way when you add an instrument to configuration to not have it show up in other configurations? Yeah, it still kind of does that. So if you have, you know, different, you know, I'll set this up so people can see it. So, I'll kind of bring this to the attention again. So let's say if I had a number of like pad shop instruments here and I save this as a configuration. So let's say if I just kind of come right over here, let's add a configuration. So say this will be our pad shops. And let's add another instrument here. Okay, so we'll call this configuration just so I'll add this and we'll call this backbone. All right, so now when I come over here, we do this. And if I want to add, let's say, an instrument called Retrolog, this will now kind of be, you know, added in the other configurations as we see this. So I'm not sure if it's, you know, designed for that or it's just kind of what happens as they're added, but I'll kind of bring it to the attention of the planning and development team again, Rob, for you. Okay. I guess I'm checking in from Paris. It's great. Okay. All right. Looks like Jazz Dude's built another monster new computer for himself. Just see Millard Brown says, "Hey Greg, the pitch shifted bass. I think I've played with that guy. So I've seen that guy play a lot too. So he's a famous bass player in clubs throughout the country." Okay. Okay, so we have a question in audio connection under inputs. Let's say you missed one of the tom mics. Is there a way to add a bus next to the other tom mics inputs instead of adding it at the very bottom? Okay. So let's go take a look at our audio connections and see if there's some clever way. It may just add it sequentially. So let's say we go to our inputs here. So let's add. Okay, and let's say at this point I wanted to Yes, I don't know of a way to do that. You know, it looks like as you add them, it's going to just kind of do it in a linear fashion. So let me just see if I could trick it. I doubt it, but I'll see. Maybe if it's closed, we add a bus. Yeah, so it looks like it's going to kind of just add it at the bottom. So I don't know of a way, but I could play around with it some more if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so I see a question. Is the pre-gain rack available in the lower zone? So currently the lower zone mix console, you know, we could see faders. I don't believe it is, but we could see faders, our inserts and sends, but not the pre-section. But if you click on the edit section, you could do that. What I see a lot of people also do is, let's say, you know, sometimes people will have, you know, different functions set up here as well. So I don't think it's, all right. So let's see if I have my, yes, I know sometimes people will have, like, you know, their, you know, some of the functions for audio tracks kind of set up here so they could, you know, see inserts, but I don't think that we could see the pre-section. And let me just make sure. Yeah, so it's just going to be faders, inserts, and sends. But sometimes, like, I'll have people that will take their inserts or like their sends here, and this way they could just, you know, see and be able to kind of toggle back and forth and see this, or have inserts and sends open, you know, while they're going back and forth between the audio. So, but it looks like kind of the pre-section you had to access from the channel strip itself. So from the EQ, but let me just see, I'll check my EQ just because I think that's not going to contain, it's just the 4 bands there. So I don't know of a way to do that. Right, you see Agent K doing some moderation. Okay, so I just see from Oren Bynum. Hi, Greg. I was told to contact software manufacturer because Absolute 4 failed installation. How do I contact them? Please help me so I can register my products. So if you want, I'm sorry for hitting my mic. That's probably annoying if you're listening with speakers. If you want Oren, I mean, I think I missed a call from you. I just wrapped up a whole bunch of busy work stuff this week, but I could reach out to you after the Hangout if you want, or just give me a call back. Okay, hi, great question. Please show how to, when saving project, how to delete unwanted audio from pool, therefore making project files smaller, i.e. save only used audio files. Thank you. So if we go to your pool window, I'll just do it with the file, the project that has some audio in it. Probably make a little more sense. Okay, so we go to the pool window, and then you could just right click and remove unused media. And that will kind of get rid of the files that aren't being utilized in your project. So once again, just in the pool, so just right click and remove unused media. Okay, so I just see question, any info on importing stems and auto aligning them with the existing guide track? So if this is like for something like a vocal, like, background vocals or guitar parts, you could do that pretty easily with the auto align functionality. So we'll show you this. So let's say if I have, like I had some background vocals here. Let's say we want to clean these up. So there's an auto align function here. And what this could allow you to do is to select one particular track, and let's have that as a reference. And I want to take all these other tracks and have these as targets. So I will now come right over here and I'll just say align audio. And even visually, we could now see that if we undid that, when we look at it visually here, we can see rhythmically that's off. And then I'll just redo it. So we want to listen to this. So that's something, so again, if you come over here, you see this icon, this would be your alignment panel, and you could also access it from your audio menu to just, open up your alignment panel here as well. So just go to audio, or is it, I think it's under audio, but you'll see alignment panel, but just this little icon right here. So, but let me know if that's what you want to do. If you wanted to do tempo tracks, let me know. We can show you how to do that as well. And Gareth is tired of everyone bragging about their 64 and 128 gigs of RAM. So, okay. So, is there a way to something similar as Patcher on FL Studio or Effects Racks in Ableton Live on Cubase? So, I'm not familiar with, those programs. But, one of the things that you can do very easily is, when you add an effects channel, so let's say, okay, I just want to come here and let's say I have a revelation. So, and this will be added, in the effects channel track here. So you could I'm not sure if this is the same thing, but this effects channel can host up to 16, different effects. So, while you send it to one effects channel, this effects channel could host up to 16 different effects with, that through one aux send. So, but I realize I don't know what the patcher is in FL Studio or the effects racks in Ableton. So if I'm misunderstanding, just let me know. Okay. Okay, so he says, "Hi, Greg. Johnny Diaz from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Good to see you in a Hangout. How to properly record multiple takes without rushing them." So if it's going to be, so let's set up just a quick scenario. So I'm not sure if it's multiple tracks or multiple takes, but we kind of show you, we'll show both ways. So let's say I wanted to just record, one particular track, a bunch of takes on top of one track. So let's say I'll just come here and I'll just go ahead and record. Okay, let my count in go. All right, so let's say I just record here. Okay, so let's say I do another recording. Now you could put it into a cycle record, and every time that you record, you can do this for multiple tracks or a single track. So let's say we have our single track. And now if I wanted to see all the different takes, they're all kind of laid out for you like so. Now, if I wanted to do this a little slightly differently, let's say we have 8 tracks and we want to automatically record these, we could put these into cycle mode as well. Hang on just one second, my son's knocking. All right, so as you can see, we've done like multiple recordings, and at this point, if we wanted to, on each take, come over here and be able to, do comping, and we could see our multiple takes there. Now, another method, if you want to do this fast, that I generally like when I'm doing more of multi-track stuff, I will come over here. Let's say I do a recording of it. I'm just going to take it out of cycle mode. So let's say this is take 1. And now what I want to do is do track version. So I have all these selected. I could do a new version. All my routing, all my processing stays the same. And let's say that's take 2. And again, just selecting these, we can come over here. Let's do a new version. And at this point, okay, we're going to do another recording of that. And now we could, once these are all selected, I could say it's going to take 1, take 2, take 3. And if we wanted to select all of these and, okay, say I want to do a new version, but I wanted to come here, let's say to take 1, and I liked this, so I'm going to do just a global copy. And let's switch to take 4. And then I'm going to paste. So, you could do, or I'll just do rather a paste at origin. So, and then you could kind of create, multiple comp takes. So those are 2 different methods. So I kind of, personally, I tend to do lanes for, like doing vocals or guitar solos where it's maybe you're doing multiple takes and you're comping. But if you want to have different, versions, like for multi-track stuff, I tend to work with track versions. So, and you could kind of go back and forth as needed. So hopefully that helps. All right. So we have Helsinki, Finland checking in. Okay. So I just see from G Scott, I didn't ask my question correctly last time. I meant in chord pads. I changed the voicing from piano to guitar, and it changed every track. Okay, so how do I get each track to have different chord options? Okay, so let's start off with, let's say, new project, and I'll just add okay, so I'll just load up a quick instrument here. Okay. Okay, so now I'll go to my chord pads. Just try a different patch here real quick. Okay, so not sure why it's not. Okay, so let's say if I'm here. So, when you trigger the chord pads are going to be set up based on, whatever chord settings that you have here. And you could do some, let me just. Sorry, let me just find different sound just for now. Okay, so when we have just these particular sorry, let me just get this. Okay, so these chords, if you're using it from the chord pads, I'm just going to reread this. So it's changing voicing from piano to guitar, and it changed every track. So this is, this is what the chord pads is transmitting. So if I wanted to. So, this would be, those particular chord voicings is what is going to play on that particular track. So once you have data in the parts, you could choose, just by going to the chords themselves, you could go to the voicing options and change that. But what the chord pads are triggering, this will be global. Think of this as, like a MIDI keyboard that's spitting this out. So it's not going to have, you could switch between, so let's say you go to guitar player, and then, you could say now piano player. And, if you're just doing it like that, you could switch, but this is going to be kind of global. And, this is what, this is transmitting the voices of a piano player or guitar player to the receiving tracks. So you could say, I wanted, to record on this particular track as piano player. I want to record on this as guitar player. So that's how you do, but it's not going to do kind of multiple. This is, transmitting those chord voicings, directly from the event. So it's not going to, if you put 3 tracks into record, it's going to record all the same thing that's being transmitted directly from the chord pads themselves. So, but if I'm misunderstanding again, just let me know. But I think I may have got what you were trying to clarify, hopefully. Okay, so how can I transfer templates from old PC to new? They didn't transfer with profile. So if you go into, where you see, and I don't really have it, I'm on a Mac, but you'll see like your Windows Start menu. Come right over to your the old Start menu here, and then you'll see go to All Programs. You'll see the where you see like Steinberg, Cubase, 10.5 or Cubase 10. You'll see kind of like where you have like the little executable launcher in Windows, like in this area when the window kind of pops up. And then directly below that, you'll see a user settings data folder. So copy that, go to your 10.5 or your previous version, copy the user settings data folder, and then go to the same thing and go to Cubase 11 to the user settings data folder, and then you could copy those templates over manually just like that. So hi Greg, is there a way to is there a way to automatically have vocal pitch notes moved into the correct in-key pitch rather than manually having to move notes and follow the colors in VariAudio? So no, there isn't a way to kind of snap directly to the, snap to being in key. But I would say 90 or hear the terms like, oh, you're singing out of key, you're singing out of key. And generally it's not that they're singing out of key, it's they're singing out of tune. So a lot of times when you're doing vocal processing, it's not necessarily that they're hitting an F natural instead of an F sharp. It's that they're trying to get an F sharp and it's just out of tune, it's flat or sharp. So, but to kind of simplify the process, what you can do if you're doing VariAudio editing is just kind of come right over here. And let's say as we're working with it, you could just select all of it and just go to quantize pitch. So this doesn't quantize it to the scale, but 9 times out of 10, that's what you need to do. And we could see kind of all those pitches of these notes just kind of shifting just by quantizing the pitch. So select those notes, and that's most of what you have to do. So, but there isn't kind of like an automatic, snap to scale. I know it seems like it's so obvious to do, but for most vocal edits, it's not that they're singing out of tune, they're not singing out of key, they're singing out of tune. So Okay, question. Is there a way to map volume faders from the mixer to different knobs on the MIDI controller and then live record multiple volume faders at once for dynamic mixing instead of automating one track each? So yeah, you could definitely do that. So if you wanted to do quick controls, that's an easy way to do that. So I'll just revert this project. Or generic remote. So let's say I have this project going on. So let's say I have knobs on my MIDI controller. So I'll come here to my studio setup. And so let's say I will connect this, let's say generic remote. All right, so I'm going to tell this where my MIDI controller is going in and out. So I'll do a learn. So that's controller 40, go to fader 2, 41, 43. Let's say 42 rather, so 43, 44, 45, 46, 47. All right, so let's say I wanted to go to VST mixer, and at this point, we could just say, I want to take, the vocal here. So we'll say VST mixer and Andrea. So we'll just do, so let's say this is our loop. Okay, so I will take this track as Groove Agent. Let's do this as Tambourine. Let's do this as our ooze. So, this is kind of mapped for me automatically. So now as I'm playing back, I could just move my MIDI controller and just the faders, and that's controlling the volume. So once again, just kind of go directly to your generic remote. And then once you have kind of your generic remote set up, these are my, and you could have, I think 32, 32 MIDI faders on your controller, controlling 32 tracks, and you could do multiple banks of those if you have more faders. So that's an easy way of setting up, your MIDI controller just to control, different knobs, and to control your volume so you can do automated mixing. See, Agent K is doing some moderation. Thank you. Okay, so just seeing from TrueCardy or TrueCard 3, Very Audio does sound the best. So yeah. All right, good to see Charles K on the Hangout. All right, so we see Ivan on a Hangout. Good to see you, Ivan. Hope you're doing well. All right, so I see Gareth K saying Project Logical Editor will have to be New Year's resolution. So once you get into it, it's cool. So I see a question from David N. I have a 3-year-old 80K PC. Is more RAM needed to run more VSTi? How could 96 RAM perform for a standard i7 7800 CPU 3.5 gigahertz? I use Contact, Omni, Superior 3, Ample Sound, along with recorded audio. So, you could see how your system is running. I have an older 80K system as well. So, they made great computers. I'm not sure if they're still in business. I think Chris Ludwig is still doing his own PC audio business now. So, who was with 80K. But, it could really depend on, if you may need more RAM, especially if you're doing like large orchestral sample libraries. So, when you see like, the Hans Zimmers and the Junkie XLs and the Benjamin Wallfish, when you see those guys working and they're doing, huge orchestral templates, that's when you could really benefit from more RAM. So. So question, is there a way to make the tempo detection tool constant all over a song so that I could remix it? So you may not have to actually make it constant, but if you wanted to, I'll show you how you could do that. So let's see if I... just want to go to this project. So say this one has some varying tempos. So there's no real correlation between the audio and the click track. So I could select the particular audio file. And let's go to our tempo detection. So I'm going to do an offbeat correction. So we kind of figured out now if I wanted to make the tempo of this steady or multiple tracks, all I'd have to do is now I will just select, and I can do this for multiple tracks as well, but go to audio, to advanced, and we'll say set definition from tempo, and we could embed it in the audio file or in the project. And now, let's say we're roughly like 144. Make it 120 beats a minute, perfectly steady. Or I want to go to 156. 188, but steady, perfect tempos. 132. So once you have kind of, what that final step, the audio advanced, and set definition from tempo, what that's going to do is basically embed all of the tempo changes. Instead of the audio file being one static tempo value, what that's going to do is actually embed all of the tempo change information as metadata into the audio file, so that wherever you are, Cubase, when you change the tempo, knows where to accurately start from, so that when you do time stretching, that it'll be significantly more accurate. So if you have files and you do this for multi-tracks or single tracks that are varying in tempo, do you want them to be the same, or you say, okay, I like this tempo but I just want it to speed up, and doing a cello rondo, you could just change the tempo. And back to your original tempo, or I want this tempo to all be kind of more steady, so less variations, or I want this part of the tempo to have more variations. We could do stuff like that. So let's say I'll just take that and or the variations, but slower. So those are some different ways that you could actually, kind of play around with the tempo detection and make it constant if you need to. All right, just seeing nice comment from Tim Weinheimer. Thanks, Greg and Steinberg, for everything you do. Great music programs. So, all right, yep. So I just kind of show what the smart people at Steinberg do, so they make my job easier. All right, let's see if I think I may have missed part of a first question. All right, so all right. Okay, is there a way to make the tempo? Okay. Okay, so I think we kind of went through that question. Okay, so just see from Chris Mullins. Let me just see if I can. Looks like maybe there's an earlier comment. Okay, so it's kind of a follow up to our faders. Okay. Okay, so I think so I see Chris Mullins where we kind of showed how to do the generic remote control. So I think that's fine with that. So I just want to make sure I didn't. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. If you've learned something new, make sure you hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. Okay, just so just seeing a comment from Chris Mullins. And maybe it's going back to another. Okay. All right, so just okay, just going through different comments here. All right. Okay, so I just see from JVI, tomorrow I want to upgrade the spectral layers. A little confused with updates and upgrades to choose from. I'm assuming Spectral Layers Pro 1. Is that correct? So, the current version of Spectral Layers, Steinberg got involved with it at around version 6. The current version is Spectral Layers 7, and that comes in 3 versions. So you have one that comes with Cubase 11 and the upcoming Nuendo 11 called Spectral Layers 1. So that's, allow you to unmix vocals. And then there's a Spectral Layers Elements and a Spectral Layers Pro. So there's 3 levels, just kind of like Cubase Elements, Cubase Artist, Cubase Pro. So, and the difference between updates and upgrades. So an update is going from like a version 6 to a version 7, or version Cubase 10.5 to Cubase 11. An upgrade is going from like a Spectral Layers Pro Elements to a Spectral Layers Pro. Or in Cubase concept, it's like going from Cubase Elements and you're upgrading and adding more functionality and kind of going up the tier per se from Cubase Elements to Cubase Pro. So that's some of the terminology you may see. But regardless, I think the 50% off sale is a great deal. So I would take advantage of it for that in Iconica and many other libraries. And Dorico, so all sorts of great stuff. And Absolute 4, so... All right, so we just see, I think it's Rude right here from, so just checking in from Switzerland. Good to see you. All right. All right, so Captenergy Music is on. It's good to see you on a Hangout. All right, so we had this question mailed in, and I just see, is it possible to get wrapping mixer channel text in Windows? So I had this question mailed in as well, so I'm not sure if it's the same question, but I looked at it, currently, like when we go to, and I think this had come in like one of the 10.5 versions and maybe it disappeared. But when I add more names to the track, like in the Mac version, we see kind of two different rows here for the text names. And on Windows, I just checked it earlier with version 11. We don't see where there's two rows that come up, but it did, I think, in before like maybe 10.502, before 10.520. So I think it did it for a little bit, but I'll go ahead and kind of pass that on to the team as well, so that we could see if we, if I could find out an explanation of why it's on Mac but not Windows. Okay, so I see after exporting my mix, I heard a noise hiss in the background of the song. How can I fix this, please? Anyone, please? If it could be sometimes, we have a lot of this coming from, ironically, everyone went to digital recording to get rid of noise, and then people introduce a lot of plugins that mimic analog tapes, and sometimes those plugins add noise. So sometimes as we're working with different tape simulators and saturation plugins, they will add noise. So you may want to just check to make sure that you don't have any tape emulation or distortion plugins that could be adding noise, and maybe to, just go through and see if you could, take that plugin off and re-export it. If you have a tool like, if that's not a possible option, you could probably use a tool like Spectral Layers and be able to kind of take out those particular frequencies of the noise. In Spectral Layers Pro, if you have an isolated bit of noise, it could take a kind of a spectral fingerprint of that noise and be able to filter that out very effectively. All right, so I think it says I just see a comment from Magnus. I would like both functions, both pause and return. I think this is in regards to the transport behavior. So I think if you use the, let's say I hit play from my numeric keypad. So let's say if I do that, and then I hit stop once, it's going to stop and pause. If I hit this, so I hit play by hitting the enter key. Then if I hit the 0 key on my numeric keypad, it stops right where it is, and I can continue on. If I hit the 0 key twice, so let's say I just come here, I hit the 0 key again. So I hit it once, it pauses. If I hit the 0 key again before playing, it goes back to the start position. So that way, hit the 0 key once, it pauses, hit it twice, it will go back. So if I wanted to pause and go on, or hit it twice, so hit the 0 key once, pauses, hit the play key, hit the 0 key once to pause, and then return and hit the 0 key again to return to start position. So you could try that as well. That's how to me, that's kind of like the old, going back to Cubase from Atari transports. That's very muscle memory for me. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to press play and have the cursor stay at the far left and have the music scroll left towards the cursor instead of the cursor moving to the right? So I don't think it will do that, but I'll show you a different option. So let's say if we jump back to this project. So, there's two different schools of thought. So it used to be in the old days, it was really hard for computers to redraw waveforms like when you got to the end of the screen. So a lot of programs were just really horrible at this in early digital audio workstations. So when it had to redraw the waveforms, it would just, almost take the whole time to redraw the waveform before you would do that. So one of the things you could do is when we have kind of our play position here, when it gets to the end, we'll see that it will refresh. But if I want to change the behavior here, you could go to the auto scroll. And at this point, you could have it where Cubase will just play on. If I bypass this, so Cubase will go on and we don't really see where we're at. But another function that we could do is you could say, okay, follow, enable auto scroll, but have a stationary cursor. So when I'm here, what this will do is our cursor will stay in the center. And then the project will just continually scroll. And if you wanted to kind of change the behavior of this, like let's say if we're doing editing in the lower zone, what's kind of interesting is we could choose to have like this, our upper zone be kind of page scroll. And I could say take the lower zone here and make this a stationary cursor. So we could have that kind of function independently. So this way the music's not necessarily going to scroll to the right, because that could be maybe a little weird, but you could have it the play position. So early, some very, very early DAWs or digital audio workstations would have the continuous scroll because it was easier to redraw the waveform subtly in the background. And some people became used to that. Okay. So I just question. Someone asked why I when I put tracks into the sampler track, why I bounced it first. So the sample that sometimes when you're archiving and if you wanted to back up samples of content that is kind of tied to Cubase. So if you tied to Cubase and then you do a backup, those particular some content files may not archive. If you take a bunch of protected drum samples and then try to make a Groove Agent kit out of someone else's protected samples, it may not allow you to export those. So that's why I did the bounce. You could give it a try and see if that makes a difference for you. But some content, I know people will sometimes try to make their own like groove agent kits from other groove agent kits, but the content is kind of protected to all stay together where it makes sense. So, but if you bounce it, that creates a new file. So you could maybe, you can maybe try that if you want and see if that makes a difference. So from Pablo, can you make the text font of Notepad bigger? So I think it might be fixed, but let's come over here. I think it's a fixed size for the font. But what you can do if you need it, if you needed to, take it somewhere else. So like here in my text pad, I have copyright information. I have, the lyrics, but you can always come over here and export the Notepad data as a text file. And then you could change the size within any text editor. Okay, reading through different comments. Okay, so I see sub 403 wants everyone to hit the like button. So which Mac OS version is best with 11? So I'm running it on Mojave. We have people that are running on Big Sur. It's written for Big Sur. I read where people are running on 10.13. Also with, with Catalina, it runs fine. So, with Catalina, it kind of made a difference because I got rid of all 32-bit components, which is good, but it was kind of a difficult transition. So some older components may not be working, may not be compatible for Catalina. So just be aware of that. So, the last generation before there's a significant architecture change was Mojave. So there's still a lot of people running Mojave. So. Okay. All right, so just seeing from Chris Mullins, kind of continued discussion of grabbing the, controlling the mixer with knobs. So and being able to do automation. So it says I currently use a M Audio Oxygen 25. It has knobs similar to the Nectar. What does the Nectar do differently? It allows it to control multiple Cubase track volume faders at once while recording. So, it's really, the knobs will transmit MIDI data the same way. So, the Nectar has some great integration. It has knobs and faders, but, your 8 knobs on your M Audio controller can transmit and control the volumes the same way. So. Okay, whereas rewind and back to previous marker buttons on transport in Cubase 11, all you see is cycle, stop, play, and record. Okay, so when you do this, what you could do is wherever you see these 3 little lines, you can just simply kind of put the cursor over the 3 lines, and then you could expand or collapse that section of the transport. So just come right here. Let's expand that. So, different functions in the program and the transport, you could hide or show those different functions to reveal additional parameters. So I see a question, is it just me, or is this all this auto naming stuff people are trying to do is just being lazy? So a lot of times you know, it's not necessarily that's being lazy, but someone may hand you a project, and in our world of DAWs, it's really easy to not name files and you pass it on to someone else. And, you know, instead of, you know, having all the files with relevant names, they just say audio 1 through 64. So sometimes if you could, you know, change naming schemes, that can help, because it's maybe you're mixing a project that you didn't record and someone else wasn't so good with their naming conventions. Okay, my chat field just jumped. Let me rewind back. Okay, so I may have lost. All right, so I may have lost a couple of questions. I apologize for that. Okay, so question from Jay. Almost forgot, Greg. I'm planning a hard drive upgrade soon. However, I have a number of Steinberg licenses on hard drive instead of e-licenser. How can I transfer licenses to a new hard drive? So you could, you know, go through the, you know, there is a process if you have the soft e-licenser to, you know, to get a reactivation code. But you know, if you have a USB e-licenser, I would just put them on the USB e-licenser, and then you never have to worry about hard drive upgrades, and it just makes kind of the whole process of migrating to new systems so much easier. So, but there is a reactivation process that we have for soft e-licenses, but you could really check, you know, really consider moving it to just a USB. You know, you already have one for your Nuendo license, and just have, you know, so that one license, I think I have 100 different licenses on my one e-licenser. So. Okay, so question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to automatically have vocal pitch notes moved into the correct in-key pitch rather than manually having to move notes and follow the colors in Vari Audio? So, you know, there's a number of different ways of doing it. So let's say if I have my Vari Audio and I'm here, we'll just kind of zoom in. So I could just do a select all, you know, and for a lot of vocal tuning, you know, I see lots of people, you know, just will do something like this. So, you know, you could select like your entire phrase and just come here and you could quantize the pitch. And since version 10, this is actually switched, you know, to absolute mode. So now it'll just automatically snap those to the nearest pitch for you automatically. So if I wanted to, you know, let's undo that and I'll just select all. I could go to the bottom here and just do this. And this is just accessing the quantized pitch. And kind of the first generations of Vari Audio always had to kind of go over here and, you know, switch between, you know, segment mode and pitch mode. But now you could just kind of select all and use the smart controls here. So that's the fastest and easiest way to do it. So I think once you do that, that's 90 to 95% of vocal tuning, you know, and then you could tweak vibratos if necessary. Okay. Just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. It seems like Gareth wants Backbone on sale, so. All right, Walter Blackledge is back, so good to see. Okay, so regarding automation points, it would be handy having an absolute link function with the mixer channels. So there kind of is one already, so you could try this as well. So let's say, if I have these two and they're separate and I link them, I could link them just like that. But if you click on the ABS here, then as you move one, they'll go to their absolute value. So now or you could just disable that. So now they'll be proportional. And now when you click on ABS absolute, you move one, the other one will jump and it'll both do the same value. Okay, so it says my symphonic orchestra can't find the sound instrument. What step do I take to get them back? So, I'm not sure if it's the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra, but, once you go into the library manager, so, if it's the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra, there was the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra player, and then it changed and it migrated into the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra sound set. And you could run that sound set inside of Hallian Sonic SE, Hallian Sonic, or Hallian. So let's say if I go to my Steinberg library manager, we could now just come over here. So we'll see, so as we come over here, we have probably the Hallian Symphonic Orchestra. So, and once you're here, this is a utility program you could download. It's often comes installed with Cubase and when you buy a library. And you could just come right over here and, you could right click on the content file and just say open in the Steinberg library manager. And that will make all of this internal software links. But let me know if that's but there is a utility just to kind of automatically find all of the Steinberg content. So, but let me know which is for Video 6 full, if that is the particular library, and other libraries may have different similar solutions. All right, so question. So it says maybe you don't answer this because it might not have anything to do with Cubase. When I install a third-party VSTI message, I get the error message, bad machine bindings to software license. What's that? So I don't know off the top of my head, but maybe if it's if you indicate which plugin it is, but it sounds like it's, some licensing message, from that particular plugin. It's not related to Cubase. So, but if you share the plugin, maybe someone else has an idea. Okay, good to see Jeff Zawelski on the Hangout again. So it says not gamers. So our most modern onboard video motherboards on par with what the Steinberg Pro apps require resolution wise. I'm going to rebuild, studying all hardware. I know what I'd like. Thanks. I tend to use the built-in display drivers on my system. I don't do anything fancy. I'm just running 2 screens at 1080p resolution, so I'm not doing high DPI. And I try to keep the video very simple. And I've had kind of similar discussions with, Junkie XL about it. And, he doesn't want to run high DPI because, you know, he doesn't want to have that tax on his system because, you know, for every pixel, if you're running at 4K, every pixel has to be redrawn 4 times, and he'd rather have the performance going into his audio processing as opposed to the video processing. He considers that kind of secondary. He wants it to look good because he's looking at it for hours a day. So, you know, often, and maybe Jazz Dude could kind of comment on this. But, you know, he may have, I think he kind of plays around with more video cards, but, you know, sometimes, you know, not being too fancy with the video could help your audio situation. So. Okay, so I see from Taylor in 10.5, when I hit stop twice, it returns to start a play. It doesn't do that in 11. Preferences are set in the same both. How can I get 11 to do that? So I'm not sure, Taylor, if you're hitting stop in from the stop button. So let's check it out here. So let's say in my transport, I have return to start position on stop unchecked. So I'll hit apply. So I come here. Okay, so it seems like it's... So it seems like to me that mine is kind of doing that, but if I just hit the 0 key on a numeric keypad, let's see. And let me try toggling the preference.
We played our records into the night. We played our records into the night.
So mine seems to be returning to start position and maybe not following, but I may have changed some things in my system, but I'll play around with it some more. All right, so just seeing some comments from Chicardi about automatically setting the key and having the notes automatically change to that. So if you wanted, you know, another option, not in Very Audio, but if you wanted to do it for where you define the key and you want it to be kind of automatically on, that you may want to check out is if you go under pitch shift and go to pitch correct. Here you could actually set the key. So you can say, okay, I want to be in C major, and this will kind of snap the notes. This doesn't give you kind of the graphic editing capability, but, you know, if you want to just define a key and forget about it, you know, check out the pitch correct plugin found under the pitch shift menu and try that as well as another option. All right. Hello, Greg. Groove Agent 5. I needed a drum pattern with brushes instead of sticks. How can I get that? I'm doing a soft bowed and can't seem to find any presets that have brushes. So I'm not sure if there's a lot of brush kits. You know, one of the add-on kits, it's probably not what you want to hear, but a great add-on kit that you could have. I'll just fire it up here quickly. I'll just do new project. But if you check out the Simon Phillips jazz drums for Groove Agent, there's lots of great brushes in there. Plus, you have Simon Phillips play your parts, which doesn't suck. And just really So let's say, so lots of different brush kits in this one specifically. So let's say as we play, I'll just sync this to the tempo. So you have kind of all your dynamics, different levels of intensity. And I'll just go ahead and load up another. And this is where you have like different 6/8 patterns. And let's say if you wanted to set this to, you know, different timing feels, you could do that as well. So there's lots of brush kits here, so if you're looking for. So So a couple of different brush kits. So really check out kind of the Simon Phillips Jazz kit. There's lots of great brush examples and brush content directly in there. Okay, we're doing well on time. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Okay, so I just see a comment from Lloyd Wright. It's odd I have a new PC made strictly for music. Don't know how this could have happened. 32 versus 64-bit VST2 versus VST3. I'll contact the East to West and see if they can resolve my issue. So you know, generally, you know, any program, if you have a new computer, make sure you have VST3, make sure you have, you know, 64-bit, you know, when possible. You know, VST3 has been out for 2008, maybe earlier, 2006, maybe. So it's been a long time. So, you know, the plugin developers should really kind of jump on that. And, you know, 32-bit's been dead for a long time as well. So those are kind of really legacy functions. All right, so we have a question. Greg, can we create a screen inside Cubase where you can add buttons and after each button we put a key command? I have touch screens besides my big screens would be faster working by just touching. I've kind of passed on to a very similar request. So I've had the same idea and passed it along. So, but yeah, I think I would love to see that as well. I know lots of our composer clients would. All right, question. Why is the EQ default to on position in Cubase now? Is Cubase adding color to our tracks by having on? All right, so I'll just do a new project and I'll just check my if the EQs are on by default. So I'll add an audio track. So my EQs are off by default, which I thought was how they were functioning. So those are kind of disabled by default, and let's make sure everybody use EQ default to on position in Cubase now. So I don't think so. And is Cubase adding color to our tracks by having on? So, I'm not sure if like where we see our, if you wanted Cubase to automatically, and I'm sorry if I'm misunderstanding, but if you want Cubase to automatically colorize the tracks, like as they're added, you could go to preferences and under user interface, go to track and mix console channel colors. So I just have this as, use previous track color +1. So that when I come over here, let's say add audio track, now these will all be different colors that are added automatically to it. But I don't think that's the default setting. It's probably set to no colors. So. Okay, so I see from Berlin Stolled, hey Greg, still couldn't solve the high DPI problems in version 11. New drivers didn't work. I can't force it to ignore the scaling as I could with 10.5. Any chance you could pass this on? I'm at my wit's end. So, I will pass it on, but, it's kind of functioning, when you go to 125%, it's functioning kind of as expected. And that's how it's kind of designed by the operating system and Cubase to work. So I don't know if you want to email me a screenshot of, what it looked like in version 10.5 and what it looked like in version 11. You could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. I don't think that they're going to, it's an inordinate amount of work to come up with your own scheme for like an application independent scheme for high DPI scaling. So because it could be different for every single display card, and there's no way to really maintain that from our end effectively. So, it could be something where, maybe you don't run high DPI mode. You go to your preferences, I believe it's under general, and try to disable high DPI mode, or, maybe look into another card. But, if it's scaling correctly when you set it to, 125%, 175, 100, 200%, then, that's kind of, what Cubase is doing. It's functioning correctly. So. All right, so I just see a comment from John Barry. It'd be nice to have the option of the channel editor in the lower zone too. So I requested that, so I'm still waiting for that. All right, so comment from Jeff Zabelski. Found older projects, 12 years old from SX2 on HDD drives of old. All the new Groove Agent 5 MIDI parts make everything now new. Makes me sound like a genius now. Laughing out loud. All right. All right, so I see a question from Paul Claridge. Greg, I can't seem to find any tutorials online show all the standard features of how to use Groove Agent 5. I know I did like 7 or 8 different videos, and they might be kind of buried in older ones. But if you want to email me, Paul, at clubcubase@steinberg.de, then I would be happy to send you a link. I think they're maybe on a playlist, but they might be on the VST Instruments channel for Steinberg. But I think I could dig up some if you want. So just drop me a message. So I just seeing another comment from Chicardi. It says, I'd hope in C11 will automatically move the notes as a key is changed as snap to scale. One moves the notes a few cents to be snapped into the closest key. So, I think if we did that, people would be really unhappy, just if you change the key that the vocals or changing what they didn't want the vocals to. So, and I kind of understand the desire for that, but, again, it's, most people are singing out of tune, not out of key. So, use these colors and be able to find, quickly and use your ears, and that will give you the best results for that. So I just see, can you pinch zoom with the Apple trackpad? I don't think it's really set up to do that currently. And if I open up my laptop, it will just kind of make all my screen resolutions jump. So. Okay, so you see, did you skip my questions, Greg? I sent them to the mail at Cubase. So I haven't gotten to the user questions yet. So we're kind of working to get our way there. So, but if Pablo, if you want to just ask the question, you could always enter it in the comments field as well. But I do have, 5 or 6 questions. I know I've answered a couple of them. Okay, so question, is it possible to make the inspector wider, or can you add short name aliases for instruments and plugins? I can't read a lot of the plugins and instruments in the inspector. So currently the inspector is set to, it's a fixed width currently. So let's say if I come here to like plugin names, let's add a couple. Let's add Groove Agent SE is kind of a longer name. So, as soon as so is it in the ports where, maybe JC, if you could let us know if it's in the ports where you can't see the name. So, let's say this is, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. That's 15 characters, and we could probably get 20 characters. So if you could let me know if there's like particular plugins that you can't see, or if it's in this particular area. I understand that you may want to kind of extend this over, like, this inspector you could extend over, and maybe that's helpful. But this one is kind of a fixed width currently. So. Okay, so I see, just reading through comments. Okay, I see kind of, hi Greg, can you elaborate why Steinberg discarded support for the Houston controller? Will there be a solution anytime soon? Lots of people own one and still one of the best Cubase controllers. I haven't gotten an explanation why Houston was discontinued. Sometimes it gets to, I still have one in my studio. But sometimes it gets to a point where maintaining, the quality assurance and the quality control and the testing of it gets to be, difficult over time, so it has been, I think, discontinued for about 18 years at this point. It's going on 19 years. I think it was 2002. But I'll see if I can find out some more information if you want to email me just as a reminder. But I still like my Houston as well. And I think like Grant William Nicholas, who's on the Hangouts, he's also a Houston user and still see him around. Okay, so I just see any help with MIDI jitter. I have used all Steinberg's suggestions on PC. So if you could let me know where you're experiencing MIDI jitter and give me more details, if it's with the external MIDI interface, if it's a virtual instrument, and what you consider MIDI jitter. Because I think jitter is often used with audio clocking. But that would be if Jason Everett, if you give me some more information, and you could email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so I see from Jeff Zabelski, thanks, Greg, for everything. Do you know those that overclock their systems? So lots of people, overclock their systems and will get, bigger fans and, make sure that the cooling systems are good so that they could run stuff overclocked. I tend not to do that so much. My requirements are probably a bit more modest, but probably Jazz Dude is a great resource on that. But sometimes you just have to make sure that, the cooling system is is sufficient for running it overclocked. So. Okay, so question, since the latest upgrade, my Cubase is lagging all over the place when Asio Guard is enabled. Is that normal? With Asio Guard deactivated, it runs really smooth. I know that some programs tend not to work well with Asio Guard. I seem to remember something, I'm not sure if it was resolved with like VE Pro, but I think if you go into Plugin Manager, and, so let's say if you come over here and let's say if you go to, that there's a way, probably just where you could disable Asio Guard for particular plugins. So you see when I come over here, I could select a plugin and then you could disable or enable Asio Guard. So it could be one plugin that's not liking Asio Guard. So maybe try disabling a couple of plugins if you notice that you're using, like it happens with this plugin. So go into your VST plugin manager, and not there, but your VST plugin manager. Sorry about that. Hate it when it's operator error. On my part, select a plugin and then try to, you could try seeing if you could disable Asio Guard, because you could do that on a plugin by plugin basis. Okay. All right, just kind of reading through different comments. Lots of great discussion. All right. So Neurotic Nexus is just says, I think my question was passed again. Maybe it did something bad. Nobody likes me. We like you. Just let us know what your question is. Sometimes when my chat field jumps, I lose some of the questions in between. So I apologize for that. But, if you send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'll be happy to make sure it's in the next Hangout or answer it directly. Sorry about that. Okay. See lots of great song titles for the Gareth Club Cubase band here. Hot Mess. Okay, so I just see a question. Which Cubase version is this? So I'm running version 11, Cubase Pro 11. Okay. Okay, so we have a question from Rich Cole. A lot of third-party plugins emulate Neve preamps and Neve API and SSL consoles and EQ. Does Cubase model any of this gear? Cubase doesn't model specific hardware pieces, but Steinberg does have the Neve Portico plugins, which is, I think, the 55 or 5536, 5546. So the Neve Portico EQ and compressor. We did that kind of in conjunction with Yamaha using their VCM modeling technology. And that's actually the only model that's, that is approved by Rupert Neve and Rupert Neve Design. So if you want like a really high quality Neve emulation, check out the Portico series plugins. So, but not that comes inside of Cubase. So. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great discussion. Hope everyone's learned something. Okay, so question. Hello, when programming controllers like that, will the automation also translate to motorized faders? Yes. So that will play back the motorized fader. So, as long as that's routed through it and the device has a motorized fader to do that. So, yeah, no problem. So. All right, so we see Gareth is scouting for song lyric ideas and song titles. So. All right, so let's see. Jazz Dude says, I tell Herbie Hancock you messed up his great maiden voyage to 140 trance song. Herbie has my number, so we talk periodically. So, very nice man. Always a pleasure talking to him. Okay, so a question. Hi, Greg. Cubase Hangouts help us a lot, and I'm glad to hear that. Thank you. You're welcome for that. All right, so how to split a stereo track that is already in the project, split channels. Can you explain stereo combined panner? So if we have a stereo track So I'll just grab a loop over here. So let's say, all right, so if I have a stereo track, what you could do if you wanted to split that, we could select the track. You go to Edit and Convert. You'll see, I guess it's, convert tracks, maybe it's in the project. Okay, so go to your project menu and go to Convert Tracks. And you want to say multi-channel to mono. And at this point, we could do the selected track, or we could do all multi-channel tracks, and we could have different naming conventions. We could keep the source tracks, or we could mute the source track. So, or delete or disable. So we can now just come right over here, hit OK. And that could automatically just kind of split. So just come, right here and choose to, select the track, go to Convert Project and Convert Tracks. So, and I did the wrong thing again, but just, so Project, Convert Tracks, multi-channel to mono, or you could do mono to multi-channel, same thing. So now the second part of the question was, can you explain stereo combined panner? So let's say I have this track, and let's say this is our stereo track, and what I want to do is to select the panner. So a lot of times we have a balance. So if I wanted to take this particular file, and as we play, I can move it to my right or to the left speaker. But maybe I want to move it, and if we go on a stereo track, we could also go to our combined panner. And what this is going to allow me to do is I could say, I want it panned mostly to the right, or mostly to the left, but I want it to be narrow, or I want the panning to be kind of wider. So you could have kind of varying amounts of panning, and you could adjust like the left and right panning just with your mouse scroll wheel right here. And something else that's kind of cool, if I take this, I can make it narrower as I move up, or wider. And if I wanted to flip the left and right channel, I could just continue to go up, and then you could invert the channel. So when you see your fader that turns orange, that's inverted. So you could just automate. So those are some of the benefits of the combined panner as opposed to just having a balance where we're moving the whole thing kind of to the left or right, but not varying amounts of it or altering the width. So I see from Pablo, what should be put in the title of the mail for Greg. So, you could just definitely, just send it to Club Cubase question, and, I will see it. So. All right. So we see Jeff Zabalski's dad was a pianist and loved Herbie Hancock. And that Gareth's daughter is listening to Roundabout by Yes. All right. Good for her. So I see, do any of the EQs have an auto gain feature? I don't think so off the top of my head, but let's take a look through them. So, as you're doing this, you're boosting or cutting the particular frequencies with the channel EQ. I guess you could use the dynamic EQ portion of, when we get into frequency. So, as we come over here, we could say, so let's say I'm in band 5 and I want to enable dynamic mode. So I don't think there's an auto gain makeup here. So, but you could control the dynamics of just that particular band. So, so as soon as you get into frequency 2, you just kind of click on dynamics here, and then you could toggle back and forth, or if you wanted to see this. Okay, just reading through some of the comments. Okay, so we have a question. Is the VST ambient decoder available in Cubase, or is it only in Nuendo? So I believe it's in Cubase as well. So I'll come over here. Let's go to, I think it's going to be, yeah, so it's a feature in Cubase as well. I don't have a Ambisonics configuration, but it is available in Cubase and Nuendo. Okay, so I see a question. Hey, can you talk about prerequisites in tempo detection? So, obviously having something rhythmic is helpful, but I've seen the tempo detection do some, like really esoteric stuff as well. So, they're really, so I've seen, I've been with some composers who've taken some music that didn't seem to have like an apparent meter or tempo, and the tempo detection kind of nailed it, and sometimes it may be a drum fill that may mess up the tempo detection. So there's no real prerequisites. I would just kind of give it a shot and see how it works. And then after doing a tempo detection, you could use, it'll put you into, where you could have the time warp tool. And what the time warp tool is going to allow you to do is just to take, your different, where you could actually match, say this measure starts, at a particular point in time. So if I wanted to enable time warp here, all I'd have to do is just say, this measure falls right here, and you could manually do it if you need to. So you could adjust and place your measures as you see fit manually. But, there's no real prerequisites for utilizing the tempo detection. Okay, we see Gareth is making dinner for his family. So I think usually on Fridays they have pizza. That's how long we've been doing these hangouts. And we know what Gareth and his daughter eat on Friday nights. I think it's pizza night. All right. Okay, just see a question or comment. The Steinberg download assistant needs to have a function that lets you know if you need to upgrade specific instruments in collections like Absolute 4. Any way to have that changed? So we're seeing some of those changes kind of slowly evolve. So as people are entering in like their download access code, so it's one of the new things, and these are all like incredibly difficult systems to set up, which seem so innocuous, but they could be very tricky to actually implement, especially when you have millions of users already kind of using the system. So, it's kind of moving toward that direction. I wish it was a little faster, but, we're already seeing some changes, obviously with Cubase 11, they had just such a high load of updates. There was, significantly faster than any other previous update, that the licensed server wasn't able to process activations. But now you could put your DAC code in and it'll take you directly to the downloads based on your download access code. So we're seeing some movement there to make it a little more obvious and easier to be up to date. Okay. So just see, can we ask questions here? So yeah, definitely. This is where you can just kind of ask questions right in the chat field. All right, so I just see a question. Can I remove some noise from recording analog synth? So what you want to do, if you if you need to do, like, if you have a recording and you need to remove hiss, one of the things that you're able to do now is to go into like Spectral Layers 1, can do kind of frequency based editing of audio. So if I wanted to go to audio, and let's go to, I had that audio selected, we go to Spectral Layers. So Cubase 11 and Nuendo 11 next week will come with Spectral Layers 1. And this will allow you to take, different frequency ranges. So you could probably see like hiss pretty consistently, like from an analog synth. And, at this point you could choose to do, so with, version 1, you could just come over here and just say, with Spectral Layers 1, you can say, I just want to get rid of, that particular hiss. But, you could also, just do, restoration type of functionality. So there's going to be denoising and dehissing, and where we could kind of separate different frequencies, and there's more capabilities in kind of the higher end versions that you could have as well. So check that out. The Spectral Layers could allow you to do all sorts of, restoration and kind of more forensic based audio as well. All right. Let's move on. Okay, so we have a question. Whenever I use the make notes legato function for MIDI, there's still an ever so slight gap between the notes. Is there a way to fix that? So let's go ahead and take a look. Okay, so this is kind of a cool little trick for bass lines that a lot of people aren't so hip to. So let's say if I have, let's check it out. So just put some bars and beats. Okay, so, and if let's say this is a bass line and I want it to sound like it's compressed almost. The function is, you can go to MIDI and under functions, legato, and this will hold out the note until the next note starts. So let me just check where this ends. Okay. So I'm looking at the start and end positions here, and they seem to be just swapping right out. So if I go to this note, and I'll just make sure these are all separated. I'm just going to turn my snap off. Okay, and then so none of these notes are actually joined. So I will come here, MIDI functions, and let's go to legato. So now this ends at 26.1, 488. I click here. That's exactly where that starts. So look at this, go to the next note. So the end of this note was now the start. So 86, 86, 39, 39. So that seems to be kind of functioning as expected on my end for the legato function. But let me know if you're doing something differently or if I'm misunderstanding. Okay. Okay. Is it possible to record in Cubase at slower speed and then have the recording sound chipmunk-like when sped up? Reaper has this function. Yeah, we definitely do that. So let's say I'll just throw in a couple of vocal files here.
In light, are we there yet? Where is home? Are we there yet?
So, you know, as we wanted to do this, we could just
I
say,
feel the weight. In light, we light. Are we there yet?
okay, so I'm just going to come here and I'm going to put these files all into the Elastic, and we'll put it into tape machine. So now as we kind of play.
I feel the weight.
So if you wanted to just adjust the tempo up.
Feel the weight. In light, we light.
So this is kind of
Are
mimicking.
we there yet? Where is home? Are we there yet?
So yeah, like as you change the tempo, but you could also, you know, do some other functions as well. So if I just want to take like this file here,
I feel the weight.
and we could go to your direct offline processing and say, let's go to pitch shift. And you could also just go to envelope. So, you know, if you want to do this and, you know, if you don't want to do time correction, you know, you could just kind of come directly here, say, okay, I want to start there and end there. So we'll just do it's.
I feel the weight. In light, we light.
So that's another thing you could do. And if you wanted to
I feel the weight.
change like the performance of it, you could use the pitch shift plugin, the pitch correct plugin. So if I wanted to come here, this is often like the make younger, make older function that you could do with the pitch correct plugin. So you could come over here. So let's say we're playing this and we could shift.
In light, we light.
So without changing tempo, or if I want that lower, we could shift the performance down. So that's other things that you could do.
Where is home? Are we there?
So, just come here.
Are we there yet? Where is home? Are we there yet?
So those are different techniques you do to kind of get that sound. So there's 3 or 4 ways to kind of skin the cat. All right, reading through comments. All right, let's see how we're doing on time. So I have some questions I will need to get to soon. All right. All right. All right, my chat field jumped on me again. Let me scroll back. Sorry, I may have lost a couple questions. Okay, I think I'm okay. All right, so I see from Mr. Ed, why lose every time save ALS standard preset setup from Cubase 11 only from Cubase. All 3 plugins say perfect. Thank you. So, I'll just try it quickly here. Not sure if. Sorry if I'm not understanding your question, but we'll see if we could save a quick track preset here. So let's say, okay, I'll just do quick graphic EQ setting, and let's throw maybe a filter, and let's throw a compressor on. And now if I want to save, and let's open up just a bit of EQ here and a channel strip. And I'll just save track preset. Okay, and let's see if this kind of... Okay, so we'll just use track preset. So let's look for... Okay, so it's the preset we just saved, and looks like kind of all the settings are the same there. Let's get to the EQ. That all looks the same. So that all seems to work. But if I'm misunderstanding, Mr. Ed, let me know. All right. Reading through comments. So I just see a comment from Jay. Says he doesn't want everything on e-licensors to prevent losing USB licenses when out in the world. And I could be clumsy, so I don't want to risk when necessary. And so I've actually kind of, like pre-COVID, I would actually be the guy that traveled like 100 flights a year somewhere almost every week. So, and I still have the same USB E licenser key from like 19 years ago, and I saw my original USB E licenser on my studio PC. So, okay, so I see a question. How to use delay compensation. So delay compensation is automatically done in Cubase. So, but one of the questions that comes up a lot is how to use the constrain this function here, which is the constrain delay compensation. So let's say if I have an instrument loaded up, so let's say I have something like Pad Shop. So when I play in, like, latency isn't an issue with this. So, but if I go to my mix console and I add plugins, and we can think of, as you start working with plugins, that these will be kind of like tax. So some plugins cost more tax and will tax your system, like a multi-band compressor is a good example of this. So we come over to dynamics. Let's say we have 2 multi-band compressors. Then when I just having those turned on, now when I play note, so I'll select this. I play note. You may hear on a microphone the controller hit before the note sounds. And that's because we have those 2 plugins that have a lot of latency on the master bus. So what we could do to minimize that so I could play that is when we look at our plugins on the master bus, I could turn on the constrained delay compensation, and that will bypass the plugins that cause a lot of latency. So I could play in and turn that off, and now that imposes a lot of latency. So at that point, what I want to do is to quickly and easily, instead of having to go through and bypass every one of these plugins and find the ones that have the latency tax, this will just kind of disable those very easily. So so you just see from Greg Malik, how many times are you going to just skip my question? So, you know, when I lose my chat field, I sometimes lose questions. But if you want to, you know, email it to me, I can make sure that it's, you know, that will be included in the next one. So I don't intentionally skip any questions. You can probably see that if you follow that I'm going pretty chronologically. But, you know, periodically my chat field gets reset because I get so far behind with all the questions. I apologize. All right, so Raphael's, thanks again for the amazing hangout. Really enjoyed it. Best from Vienna. So I'm jealous you get to live in Vienna. So I always wanted to go there. So maybe after COVID is over, I look forward to some travel. Okay, any macro that when you make a cut, for example, with Shift X, an automatic fade is made. All right, so let's take a look. So let's say I do a Shift X here. So one of the things that you could do, Pablo, is also just kind of check, you know, so let's say if I come here, you know, make sure that when you do this, that you have 0 crossing enabled. So right here. So you could do a snap to zero crossing. So let's say I was doing an edit here, and I'll just take off my snap by hitting J. So when I make an edit here, and I have snap to zero crossing, and I do a shift X, that's going to cut at the zero crossing point. So we can see that it didn't cut right here, it cut there. So that can make your edits cleaner. So, and if you want to have, if you look at the particular track here, you could also have auto fade settings. So you could say, I just want to have auto fades enabled, and you could choose your fades and your default crossfades so that every time the audio plays back, it'll just do a short fade in, fade out between each little section, so to minimize clicks. So, check out those settings. And, a lot of times when you may not need to do actual fades. And if you're at the beginning of a section, so say if I'm here and I just wanted to do a fade to there, you could just hit the A key, and that could do fades to range. So at that point, so let's just look at another file here. I could just select that and hit A, and you could also do kind of fade ins, fade outs to the range and use the range selection tool. So give some of those things a try, Pablo. Let me know if those work. So I see question, hi Greg, the remove from list in the Steinberg hub doesn't work. Any other option? Thanks. I know that they're aware of the issue. So I'm not sure if there's much we could do if you wanted to reset it, you could blow out the preferences, but that may not be what you want to do. So I don't know of a workaround currently, but I know it's been in discussions. So. Okay, so I just see from Greg Malik, so maybe this is a question he asked recently. It's a best practices question. Are projects supposed to represent songs or albums? What's the best way to organize songs and versions of songs? Unless I used to, in older days, when we synchronized SMPTE timecode to tape, I would often have, for each reel tape, I would have a project so that wherever we were on a tape, that I didn't have to do any offsets, and my project would just automatically be synchronized with the tape machine. So I would have one sequence per roll of tape. I like to think of a project as an individual song. If it's an individual song, if I was doing a live recording, a live project, I may have all the files for a live recording, I would probably have all of the files in one project, and then be able to kind of edit and manipulate within one single project. But for an album with individual songs that wasn't in a live context, I would do each song as its own unique project. And that can help with file naming if you work with templates, because having a distinct folder and a distinct audio folder for each project could be really essential, especially if there's nothing worse than having 50 songs named, 50 audio files in the same folder named Bass 1, Bass 2, Bass 3. So just for file management's sake, and when you need to archive and back up a project, so if it's an individual song that's on an album, I would put the album in a folder, and put the project folder within the album folder for the song. And that's what I would do for best practices. So, and for every song, try to have its own unique folder. And I would make exceptions if you were synchronizing to analog tape, where I may have one sequence that was doing that. That's not a typical workflow these days. Or if it was a live recording, I may want to see everything live, especially if it's with video, so that I could see the video and do all the edits to the video and have that all in one contiguous project. So, all right, let's take a look at some of the questions that were mailed in. Sorry if I missed that earlier, Greg. Okay, so we touched on the automation question. So we covered some of these throughout the Hangout. Okay, so we had a question. Any idea how I could create a macro that uses or a macro using a shortcut that can disable a track, move the track to a new folder called archive? The scenario is when I've rendered a track and I just want to keep the MIDI data, but move the track to a folder called archive to get it out of the way. I also want to disable it to save on CPU. Thanks, from Aiden Sheeran. So, there isn't a way through key command or like a project logical editor preset that I've found to actually have to move a track like up or down to a different location to like a folder. So, but what I do in this situation, so I think we have like this. So let's say I have this particular file here. And you could kind of do this. I like to still have the file near like the original audio file. So let's say I have just a quick, single MIDI note here. All right, and let's just. Okay, so I'll just draw a node in. So what I would do is choose to render the file, and within the render file, so in the edit menu, so we go over here, so let's say so go to render in place, and in the render settings, just come over here, and if you have the track selected as opposed to the event, and you go to the render settings, at that point, you could choose to disable the source tracks. So I could do that. So I'll render it. It's going to disable the source track for you automatically. And we see this is kind of a bit demure, kind of grayed out. So that instrument is disabled and we have our audio track. So if I needed to go back and edit that MIDI data, I still probably want it close here as opposed to moving it to archives. But if you want it kind of out of the way visually, I would actually create a project logical editor preset. And you could do this. I made one that where I said we're going to take a media type is equal to audio or MIDI. And the property is set to the track is disabled. And what I want to do is actually trigger a macro. So I made a macro, and this is a little goofy. You could trigger a macro, but not an individual event. So when I go to my key commands, I just created a macro of, hide selected tracks. And it only has from the channel and track visibility agent, hide selected channels or tracks. So what I want to do is to select all the tracks that are disabled in this project. So let's say I have these audio tracks and I want to automatically hide that. So we're going to trigger this macro. Once we do this project logical editor, we could trigger the macro here. So I will hit apply, and we'll see that my tracks, they don't move to an archive folder, but all the tracks that are disabled are now hidden. So when we go to our visibility tab, we could just look here, and those tracks are still there. So if I needed to go back and say, oh, this MIDI part sounds weird, I could just enable, select that particular track and say, this is the MIDI part that's associated with it, re-edit it, as opposed to trying to make that connection afterwards if you really need it to. So again, this is like a Project Logical editor preset that will select all of the disabled tracks that are MIDI or audio and then trigger the macro. And again, it's just hiding the selected tracks from the channel and visibility settings and running that. And again, that will just hide all those tracks and just kind of tuck them out of the way. Okay, so we had a question. Okay, I just bought Fluid Pitch. So it says Pitch Innovations from pitchinnovations.com. I don't know if you've heard about it. So what this plugin, with this plugin, your pitch bends are always in tune. It states that you can make every MIDI keyboard an MPE keyboard. When I use it, monophonic, everything works perfectly. I want to use it with chords. I can't get it to work. First of all, I can't find MPE mode presets in Halion. When I use an MPE preset from Retrolog, it still won't work. When using record MIDI as note expression, it seems to record pitch bends, but I can't edit it. In a video, the Fluid Pitch plugin, they use it with chords in the editor. You see pitch bend drawings for every note that it's played. That's the way I would like it to work. So I'm not familiar with this, but I watched a YouTube video on it, and so if you wanted to set up an MPE controller, so I'm still not convinced it's truly an MPE controller. I'd have to say I'm probably a little skeptical on it, and it's not going to take your MIDI keyboard and just, turn that, because it wasn't, from the demo, I saw that it wrote the individual pitch bend on the notes, but it didn't write independent pitch bend on the notes. But when you come over here, you want to click on, when you go to your studio setup, make sure that you go to your note expression input device. And at this point, this is where you would set, and if it's outputting MIDI, see if it shows up here as a MIDI port. And that's what you would need to actually make that work. But again, I know it's kind of a... watching the video, all the information was the same on every single note. And that's not really what, while maybe kind of communicating that way, how to set up the MPE inside of Cubase would be just to go to your studio setup, click on, note expression input device, and see if that plugin is outputting MIDI data directly there. Okay, and then we had a Groove Agent question. Is it possible to record patterns from Groove Agent like you play it? I mean, you trigger the pattern again after a few notes before it is ended. You can play that live on your keyboard and trigger pads, but I was never able to record that. When you try to record it, the beat won't start again, but keeps on playing. Is that possible? If so, it would be very nice. And he calls this kind of Groove Agent DJ mode. So let's go ahead and take a look. So I have just an instance of Groove Agent loaded up here. So let's say we'll go ahead and open it up. And I'm just going to... So let's say I have these patterns, and when we go to the pattern editor, we're going to notice that these patterns will basically just show up, as MIDI notes. So we see kind of lower octave MIDI notes that trigger these patterns. Now, one thing that a lot of people miss is once you're in the pattern editor, you have this little settings icon, and you could switch each pad to be in one shot, toggle, or hold mode. So if I wanted to record these different patterns, what I could do is just simply record the MIDI note from a controller that triggers these particular patterns and sequence that particular MIDI note. So let's go ahead and take a look. So let's say I'm playing, and now I just want to... All right, so let's say I just kind of played that, and now what I do is group this MIDI track will play back those particular patterns, and as we play, the patterns will just switch automatically. So that what we're doing is sequencing the MIDI notes that trigger the patterns directly in Groove Agent. All right, so I think we got through the other questions that were mailed in advance. Let's jump back to our live feed. Thanks for all the great, wonderful questions. Okay. Okay, so let's see. Question, is there a way to automatically reset meter peak level in channel settings after I stop playback? So I think if we go to preferences, or maybe I'll just take a look. Let's go to maybe the mix console here. So let's say after we... So if we wanted to, let's take a look at our global meter settings. So you have different options. So you could just hold peaks or hold them forever, or just reset the meters. So maybe if we just say hold peaks and we play along. So say I stop. Sorry, I'll just play this. So say try some of those options there. So right click and go to your global meter settings, and you could choose to hold forever or hold peaks. So let's say I'll just turn off hold forever, and then you can just see that they'll just slowly fade, or you could reset the meters quite easily. All right, we have about 8 minutes left before we run out of free closed captioning. Okay, so I just see a question from Raphael, a dumb question, and other viewers here. Should I try to keep the Cubase shortcuts, or do you guys use all of your own key commands? It's really kind of, whatever gets your work done faster. I think it's good to kind of learn the logic of a software's program keyboard shortcuts, and I know it could be tough switching, and it's one of the toughest things people have switching from any other program is the muscle memory of the keyboard shortcuts, but there definitely is a logic to it. And I think I see so many people that are constantly modifying keyboard shortcuts because they want a combination of workflows, and then they don't remember what the keyboard shortcuts ever are in their programs. So sometimes, working with a fixed way aren't available in keyboard shortcuts, but try to keep the main keyboard shortcuts. Okay, just reading through more comments. We'll be wrapping up here in just a couple seconds. So I just see from Tame, why does Cubase consume so much energy on Macs? About 120%. So it could really depend, there's a lot of different variables with, what's going on. So, could be, one plugin that's doing it. Could be, I've had users come here to tell me that on their Macs they had a USB hard drive on their Mac's USB bus, and they had to dig in very deeply and find out that the USB bus powering was kind of in an eco mode, and it was turning off the bus powering. So there's a lot of different stuff, but you should also try to run the Cubase powers. That's only on the Windows platform. You can switch to power settings. But I'm not sure if it's running 100, so I don't have any problems with my Mac running kind of huge projects. Okay, so it sees so it says I can't search on MediaBay. The search does not pop up. Any help? It happens only on the MediaBay that you can open it as an independent browser. So so if we're in the MediaBay, so let's say F5. So I think if you hit Shift plus F5, that brings up the, you could also, try to go here, see if there's, let's see if maybe it's in, make sure that you have all these different windows selected. But maybe if you go to the setup window here, if you don't see it, try going to text search and make sure that in the settings cogwheel in the upper right hand corner that the text search is checked. So give that a try. So I just see, did I ask Zed about his project settings? I will the next time I talk to him. So a lot of times with the artist, I'll just kind of bring it up as I hear from them or their camp. So, but I will next time I speak with him or Skinny or the other guys. Okay, so hi, is it possible in the score editor just to make a simple chord chart with just the chord symbols? So yeah, we could do that very easily. So, and we'll probably maybe wrap on this. So let's say if I want to, let's say I have this project. Okay, so, what I could do is I could just make my friend Clay Oswald does this, where you'll just have kind of parts that are set up as lead sheets as well. So let's say I have an instrument track here, and I just want to, create a blank part. Let's go to the score editor, and let's say at this point you could go to scores and advanced layout, and we could say show chord track, and the chord track would automatically be kind of labeled and created, and that could be your lead sheet. All right, well, we're just about out of time. I want to thank everyone for wonderful questions. We'll be doing this again on Tuesday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. I appreciate all the great questions. I want everyone to stay safe and healthy. And send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. And we will see you on Tuesday. Thank you very much. Have a great weekend.